The 2024 wheat crop was a mixed bag with some winter wheat growers enjoying a good season while many spring wheat growers really struggled. And regardless, wheat prices are not a ray of sunshine right now. So what do wheat growers need to do, and what do they need to think about to give their crop the best leg up going into 2025? Joining us on the PNW Ag Network hotline is Kat Salois, Director of Research and Technology at McGregor Company. And Kat, thanks so much for the time. Before we look into the future, let's take a look back on this year. What are your thoughts on the 2024 wheat season?
Yeah, well, I do think that now that the combines are rolling, or for the most part have rolled, winter wheat yields across the region at 5 to 10% category. So maybe not that BIM buster of 2021, but definitely some nice yields across the region. Soil moisture wise, I was trying to bring up some information. I was looking back at weather trends, and I always find it kind of fascinating to look at some of our the climate trends that we've seen. So if we think about precipitation, we're going to average right in the middle. So total precipitation for the winter wheat year of 2024, we were right in the middle. It actually wasn't dry, but the perception was it was dry, and it's because April, May, and June were incredibly dry, and actually some of the bottom 20% of driest seasons we've had in the last 130 years. So kind of interesting from that standpoint. And even thinking about whether the temperature trends, we had fairly a quite warm fall last year. It ranked in the top 20% of the warmest falls we have had. But we actually had some of the coolest May and June. So that feed and finish chunk of the crop was some of the coolest we have had in the lowest 20% of cool weather trends.
So, Kat, now that we're done with 2024, let's look ahead to 2025. What do we need to do now to make sure next year is going to be a great year as far as harvest is concerned?
Absolutely. So McGregor's philosophy for yield management is called Yield 3D. And what we do with that model is we focus on the yield components of each crop and how we are going to effectively manage each one of those yield component timings. So an example is for wheat, your yield components are heads per acre, grains per head, and the weight of each one of those grains. And a way to think about Yield 3D is each one of those yield components has a period of time they're most sensitive to stresses, but also most responsive to our inputs. We call this start, feed, finish. So the start of the year is when we're trying to affect our heads per acre yield parameter. So the way I think about a really effective and profitable start to our season are what things do we have to get right this fall that we just can't make up for. So what is just those keys to success or a non-negotiable to an effective start? Every farm, every operation is a little bit different, but my list goes picking the absolute right genetics, getting our planting date and seeding rate right, and access to starter or phosphorus fertilizers. They are all key to success in our wheat growing cycle. So it kind of goes back a little bit to our planting date and seeding rate. So planting date is one we've done a lot of research on how planting date, seeding rate, and access to starter fertilizers, or specifically phosphorus, interact with each other. We got to get that planting date right. So most of our region, it's going to be the end of September, and our data suggests for every day in October that gets delayed, we're losing about a bushel of yield. So that tells you how critical that planting date is, how impactful just being ready to go, having all our ducks in a row is. Seeding rate is a tool we have that affects heads per acre, right? So how much seed we put in the ground, how many tillers, kind of makes sense. It's not that easy of a relationship. So often wheat will tiller more at lower planting rates and less at higher planting rates, and the heads per acre kind of shake out. The tool that we have that's most effective to actually driving our heads per acre yield parameter. So when you think about first and fall tillers, those are the ones that are yield and money makers. The tillers that we produce in the spring, those are generally almost suckers. They're things that create biomass we can't support with our rainfall. So we want first and fall tillers. That is all about access to phosphorus, specifically starter fertilizers. That placement is key. WSU has actually done some really interesting work where they demonstrated that when a young plant root comes in contact with phosphorus fertilizer, it encourages a lot of crosstalk among those roots and vertical root development. Where if that same seedling encounters a band of nitrogen fertilizer, it creates a lot of lateral root development. There's times and places for both of that, but in a rain-fed situation like a majority of the PNW, being able to vertically mine as much of the soil profile for moisture and nutrients is a huge advantage to us. So starter fertilizers where we can get that phosphorus band is close to that emerging seed root becomes very impactful for creating those first and fall tillers and vertical root development that is absolutely critical to mining that soil profile for the moisture that is deep within our 3 and 4 foot soil depths throughout most of the region.
Kat, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it seems like really the idea is to be on your toes and to plan ahead now rather than later.
As commodity prices come down in that bottom line, and we are scrutinizing each and every input that goes into that crop, what I'm hopefully what that conversation came out to is there are elements that are critical to an effective start that we just can't make up. We are losing from day one if we absolutely go on the defensive. So using Imstruct, which is a humic, fulvic, it has seaweed, it's a phosphorus use efficiency that stimulates root growth. It's a key component to our Kickstarter. Those are our starter fertilizer blends. That highly available access to phosphorus and root stimulation, we just can't make up. We can't make up in nitrogen top dress in the spring. We can't make up in higher seeding rates. We have data that demonstrates this. Picking the right variety, something like TMC's Empire and Impress. Empire is a very early maturing variety that does awesome late planted. Impress goes into that deep country. We can plant it early, take advantage of a long season variety, and getting those planting dates right. So as early as we can, trying to hit that September. These are ways that we just can't make up the later into the season we get. We have to be a little bit offensively minded, even with down commodity prices.
Kat Salois with the McGregor Company, thanks so much for joining us right here on the PNW Ag Network.